This is the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast, Episode 19. The Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast is a bi-weekly podcast dedicated to the world of scuba diving, ocean health, sustainability, and fostering a new generation of ocean stewards through diving education. Hi again, everyone, and thanks so much for tuning into the podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Centurpino, founder and president of the Scuba Educational Alliance of Connecticut, a nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering a new generation of ocean stewards by providing young men and women scholarships and grants to overcome the financial barriers they face when pursuing their scuba diving education and training. We are now officially into the start of meteorological summer and the beginning of hurricane season. Well, it certainly didn't feel like summer the other day when we got back from Florida. I had to put on a sweatshirt and turn the heat on in the house to take the chill off. That's New England. And today we're supposed to have our first 90-degree day since last August, and the humidity level has been building. Well, it has been 3 weeks since I last published an episode. It's been very busy. Right before the holidays, I participated in the DEMA Board of Directors meeting before we headed down to Pennsylvania for the weekend. We had a couple of family events, and it was really great to catch up with them. I could have used some warmer weather over the holiday, however, but I did get my share of that when we headed down to Key Largo to wrap up May. Key Largo is another one of my favorite places to get away for a little diving and relaxation. So, on today's show, I thought I'd jump right in and give you a recap of our quick trip down to the Keys. A couple of weeks ago, I did a blog post on my personal website about the need to find my blue mind again. I'd been out of the water for well over 200 days, and it was time to get back in the ocean. Well, for one thing, I definitely needed to get to someplace where the water is warm. And what better place to do a quick trip than Key Largo? And what a better time than to celebrate our 42nd wedding anniversary. Key Largo was the very first place that I went to after getting my open water certification. And the last time I was there was in 2019 with the dive shop. At that time, we were looking at making this an annual trip in the spring to get people in the water after their winter classes. Our 2020 trip was planned for late April with 4 or 5 days of diving. We all know what happened in 2020. The shop actually did start going back to the Keys in 2023, but headed down a little bit further down to Islamorada. I wasn't able to make the 2023 or 2024 trip because of commitments at the shop. But that has all changed since we retired from the retail dive business late last summer. One of the first things about Key Largo is that it's really easy for us to get to from Connecticut. Fortunately, there are quite a few direct flights to Florida from Hartford. Bradley Airport has several airlines that fly direct to Miami or Fort Lauderdale. Now, I prefer to fly into Fort Lauderdale as the airport seems easier to navigate. And like Jimmy Buffett said, lately, newspaper mentioned cheap airfare. Well, actually the internet did. We were able to snag a great price on the tickets from JetBlue. I think the round-trip ticket cost us about $250 each. But then you got to pay for the bags. Traveling with scuba gear costs. Now, I hate to fight for the overhead bins, so we normally check all our bags. By the time it was all done, I think we had to add another $200 for the bags. Well, that's the price we pay to be divers. Our flight left without any delays from Bradley at 7 a.m. Now, it's just about a 3-hour direct flight to Fort Lauderdale, and we arrived just after 10 in the morning. Not bad. And our luck continued. Our bags came out really quick. In the past, I've had some challenge finding the rental car vans in Fort Lauderdale. Not this time. Just a short walk outside the terminal was the bus, and we were directed on board. Last on, no waiting. That meant we were the first off at the rental car center. Couldn't be easier. Now, after picking up the car at National, we were on the road before 11. From Fort Lauderdale Airport to where we were staying in Key Largo, the Courtyard, it's right around 90 miles. Drive was pretty easy, no traffic, and we were in Key Largo by around 12:30. Before we headed over to the hotel, I wanted to check in with Horizon Divers. The dive shop is right on the Overseas Highway as you first enter Key Largo. Just wanted to make sure everything was set for our 2 days of diving. After checking out the dive shop, we made a quick stop for lunch and headed over to the Courtyard Key Largo. I like staying there because it's right on the marina at mile marker 100. It's across from the Holiday Inn if you've ever been down there. When I checked in, they were still getting our room ready, so we decided to head over to Publix, the local supermarket, to pick up some stuff for breakfast and lunch. By 2:30, we were settled into our room and preparing for our diving. So let's talk about the diving first. Now, there are a lot of really good dive operators in the Key Largo area, but like many scuba divers, we have our favorites. And for me, my go-to operator in Key Largo is Horizon Divers. Now, Dan and Molly Dawson have owned Horizon Divers for 20 years. Actually, when we checked in at the shop, they told us they had just had their 20th anniversary celebration. I think that was in April. So right there, that tells you something. You have to be doing something right to sustain and thrive in a very competitive environment. Now, Horizon runs two different boats. There is the large pontoon boat, and that normally goes on the shallower dive sites, while the smaller 30-foot island hopper gets out to the deeper sites. I've been on both in the past, but this time we opted for 2 days of shallow dives. So we were on the pontoon boat named Chica View. It's pretty big and gives you a lot of space. We also opted for the 2-tank morning dives. I like to get my diving in and then relax. I know some people don't like to get up early and prefer to wait until the afternoon. Even in retirement, I'm up early every day. Old habits are hard to break. The morning dives don't leave that early. Check-in time for the boat is 8:15, and from where we were staying at the marina, it's about 6 miles up the road to the Horizon dock, and that's on Garden Grove Drive near the Shipwrecks Bar. You got to be careful driving up that way in the early morning when school is in. There's a school right on Overseas Highway with a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit that is strictly enforced. Plus, the buses are out on the road picking up the kids. The boat rides out to the shallow dive sites are about 30 to 35 minutes depending on the actual location. Now, the water conditions were a little bit tricky this time. I was expecting flat and calm, but the ocean has a mind of its own. They indicated that the past few days there was some chop and current. So to adjust for this, our first day of diving would be at Elbow Reef, where we would dive the City of Washington and the Hanna M. Bell. Now those two wrecks are very close together and they bottom out at between 25 to 30 feet. So essentially you dive a safety stop the whole time. That's okay. The City of Washington is a special dive for me. Like I said, it was my first dive after getting my open water certification. The nice thing about the wrecks is you don't have to think about navigation. Just follow the wreck. Visibility was pretty good for the first two dives. I'd say about 80 feet or more, and the water temperature was a very comfortable 82 degrees. Now that's my kind of diving. The highlight of our dive on the City of Washington for me was a small green moray eel that was actually more brown than green. It swam out into a coral growth and then began poking its head out. Then on the Hanna Bell, we had an encounter with a school of midnight parrotfish that came swimming very close to us. These first two dives were a great tune-up after being out of the water for a very long time. The next day, we headed out to the Dry Rocks area. Our first dive was to a place they called North Dry Rocks. I don't think I was ever on this site before. It's a shallow dive like the others with fingers of spur and groove coral. Then our second dive was to the statue of Christ of the Abyss. They called this site Largo Dry Rocks. This was a fun little dive, And having viewed the Dive Heart video, YouTube video, Legend of the Statue, it put the dive in a whole new light, knowing how this 9-foot bronze statue made its way from Italy to Key Largo. You got to watch that on the Dive Heart YouTube channel. I think I mentioned that a while ago in one of my sea state updates. Now, we had a couple of very interesting underwater encounters while on this dive at the statue. After cruising around the statue for some video, Donna and I headed around the coral structures. She spotted a lobster really tucked into a small space, and when she went around to get a better shot, there were two little hi-hats darting back and forth. It was really neat to see them sort of chasing one another around in that small area. I was able to get in pretty close for about 30 seconds of video. Now, I posted a YouTube short on my YouTube channel if you want to check that out. If you go to YouTube, just search on Jefferson Serpino and hit the subscribe button. I tried to get a new video up there every week. After we came back around the statue, it was almost time to end the dive when out of the blue came a spotted eagle ray. It made its way right past Christ of the Abyss and headed out over the top of the coral. Wow, what a great encounter that was. Again, I got an okay video of the flyby, but unfortunately I didn't get the full statue in the shot. You see, quite a few years ago I switched from shooting my old GoPro to focusing on still shots. I go back and forth all the time. But when I was at DEMA this year, they had a great deal on the GoPro Hero 13 that I couldn't pass up. Plus, I thought it was time for a change. So another goal of this quick trip was to get back in the water with the GoPro and see what I could do. Let's just say it's always a learning curve, and sometimes the viewfinder on that small camera is a bit of a challenge. I have a lot of reading and experimenting to do before we head to Lembe in October. Anyway, I'm going to also put a video out on YouTube of this as well, and it'll be titled "The Return to Christ of the Abyss." Hopefully I'll get that up there soon. Okay, this recap would be incomplete if I didn't talk about the dining. Now, Donna and I are not really foodies, so we don't seek out the high-end restaurants. I like pub food and a good beer selection. Now, we did stop into Sharky's Shark Bite Grill on the marina right next to one of the Rainbow Reef locations for a quick beer. This is the ultimate dive bar, and the happy hour prices were really good. For dinner that first night, we headed over to the Pilot House. We chose to sit outside on the water as the sun was going down. The Pilot House is located at 13 Seagate Boulevard, just off the highway at mile marker 99.6, very close to where we were staying. They had a conch chowder special that was pretty good, and I needed to see how it would stack up with the conch chowder at Skipper's Dock. That's where we had dinner the second night. Last time I was in Key Largo, I ate there twice and enjoyed the food and service. I gotta say, the conch chowder at Skipper's was the winner. It had a little bit more kick to it. Unfortunately, the service at Skipper's left a little bit to be desired. The food was good, but we were sort of abandoned by the staff. Sometimes that happens. Friday night was pizza night. Donna and I headed up the road a couple of miles to Upper Crust Pizza. Now, I wrote about Upper Crust Pizza in my book, Your Next Dive. Funny how you make your way back to places that remind you of past trips. They have a very good pizza selection, and we ordered the broccoli and cheese. Hint, the 14-inch is bigger than you think. Good thing about pizza is that it's one of the only leftovers that I'll eat. And now, I had lunch for the next day. Saturday was our day to get out and about. For many years, I wanted to visit the History of Diving Museum in Islamorada. Finally, this time, I got there. They're celebrating their 20th anniversary this year also. It was extremely interesting to see all the old stuff. Some of the homemade helmets are very bizarre. One of the highlights is the wall of dive helmets from around the world, the centerpiece of the museum. Donna and I enjoyed the visit, and it was fantastic to finally get there. After finishing up at the museum, since we were already in Islamorada, we went down the road about a half a mile to the Islamorada Brewery and Distillery. They have a tasting room for all the spirits, starting with vodka, moving to gin, and then they have a couple of different rums and a bourbon. Wasn't expecting to do a spirit tasting, as I'd rather focus on beer. So after tasting the spirits, we got a flight of 6 different beers. Now this time of year they really don't have any dark beers. Since we got back from the brewery later in the afternoon and grabbed lunch on our balcony, I wasn't very hungry, but since we were leaving early the next morning, we opted to go out for a salad. I wanted to go to Snook's Bayside restaurant and tiki bar, but somehow I got fouled up with the GPS and we ended up at the Bayside Grille and Sunset Bar. Confusing. But it was a very nice place on the Bayside with a spectacular sunset, and I had a very good Caesar salad. The trip back was, for the most part, uneventful. We needed to leave the hotel at 4 a.m. for the drive back to Fort Lauderdale, and we boarded the flight on time, but then sat at the end of the taxiway for over an hour. The pilot said that air traffic control needed to reroute planes because of bad weather up north. That's funny, I checked various weather maps and couldn't find any bad weather between Florida and Connecticut. I suspect this had something to do with all the recent news about what's been happening with U.S. air traffic controllers. In any event, we still did get back to Connecticut by early afternoon and had time to rest up before Monday. Guess that doesn't much matter since we're both technically retired, although I am still staying very busy with the nonprofit. So after a long time out of the water, it was great to find my blue mind again, get some diving in, practice with the GoPro, enjoy Key Largo, and get tuned up for our trip to Cayman Brac with Dive Pirates later this month. Now, I'd like to get down to Key Largo more often. Maybe we can look at making this an annual event, but trying to plan a year in advance is always challenging. Who knows what craziness will transpire in the year ahead? We've certainly seen our share since January. So that wraps up episode 19. Thanks again for tuning in, and please subscribe to the podcast where you get your podcasts. And I'll be back again just before we head down to the Caymans. Bye. This has been the Scuba Educational Alliance Ocean Podcast, a show dedicated to the world of scuba diving, ocean health, sustainability, and fostering a new generation of ocean stewards through diving education. Talk to you again real soon.